Heaven is for real, and heaven is where we meet God. Now, we've talked about God in Dying to Live, but not going into it in much detail. But there is a God who is a God of love and mercy, and all the emphasis is on mercy, not on judgment, not on a God of wrath, which some people believe, and of course that isn't any God. There's no God like that. It's a God of mercy. So we want to tell the reader, look, the one you're going to meet at the end of life is a God who loves you, who sent his son to die on a cross for love of you, to open up heaven. And he is a God that you're going to look forward to meeting. He is a father. He is love. He is mercy. He is forgiving. So we want to tell the reader, the God that you're going to meet is a God that you will long to be with and to spend eternity with. So he doesn't look upon God as some distant spirit creator, but he's a person and he's a father. That's the idea of that.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel, your host. Excited in the studio is a priest of Opus Dei. He's very familiar to our audience, author of various books, including this brand new one, From Time and Eternity. None other than Fr John Flader joins me now. Hello, Father. How are you?
Very well, Charbel. Good to be back again.
Yeah, it's great to have you again. And you've been busy. You're writing not one, but two. I have to mention Question Time 6 is out as well. So this is now the sixth book you've got from Question Time. We'll talk about this a bit later in the show as well. But wow, not one, but two books have been released. This now completes, I guess, a trilogy of books.
And I hope it stops there.
Yeah, you might have another idea. But I do remember we've had you on twice before talking about Dying to Live. So this was the first book we talked about, Reflections, Life After Death. And then, you know, it wasn't long after that, then the idea of a sequel to that and the final exam, preparing for judgment. And I remember we talked about that. But then this third one, From Time to Eternity. So we've got to talk about this today.
Yes.
And this completes a trilogy, but could you, I guess, start with what inspired you to write this third book on the topic?
Well, let's start with the first one, with Dying to Live, because this story it's written in the introduction, if I remember correctly, but I wasn't going to write any books on life after death. So why are there now three? Well, first, because a friend on a retreat in the Kenter Study Center, when I was giving the retreat, and it's January 2 years ago, said, wouldn't it be good if there were a book on life after death for people who don't believe in it? And I said, what a great idea. So I wrote that book, and it took several months. It didn't take long at all, because I had some material and I got more ideas and did some research, and it was helped by COVID. I think that was the book that was helped by COVID, because I couldn't go to schools where I'm a chaplain, so I could write a book. So that was that book. Then it came out, and it sold very well. It was a popular book. It's written in a very conversational style, informal English, not formal English at all. Very different from the other books. So then that book was out. Then a friend in Brisbane said, thank you very much for this book. Can you please write another one in this same style? I thanked him for the email, had no intention of writing another book. And then I was praying about it one day, and I thought, well, wait a second. The final chapter of Dying to Live is, what must I do to get to heaven? But it's not well developed. And so we thought, let's have another book which is a full development of Catholic moral life, and based on the Ten Commandments, but based on the natural law. So not the Catechism, not Bible, not magisterium of the Church, just natural law, and why all the Ten Commandments are based on the natural law, including minor areas like contraception and you name it. So that's the final exam, with aspects there of conscience and the natural law. It said itself. And another topic. So that's that book. So that came out because a friend was asking, write another book. And I thought, well, yeah, there is another book in this.
Yes.
So that was the end of writing more books on life after death, until I was on retreat myself, or in Kenthurst, just in this past January. an idea just occurred to me from something I'd read of St. Josemaria. It just one sentence, and it triggered an idea for another book. And then I have a principle of late, when you get old like me, I have a principle which says, if you think something is a good idea, just do it.
Yes.
Don't go to your grave thinking, I should have done that. Just
Yes.
do it.
So true.
I had this idea, and the idea was, how about a book for people in their daily life to keep their eye on the goal, which is heaven, while they make their way through life with all of its ups and downs and its busyness and its family concerns and its sickness and health, and how do we keep our eye on the goal as we go through life? But like the other two, it's written for the non-believer. So again, there's a bit more on Catholic ideas of heaven, for example, and God, because those have been justified in the first two books. But it's written for the non-believer, therefore the author is not a priest as far as the reader can make out from the book. There's no imprimatur from a bishop. I didn't want that. We didn't want to scare away the atheists from the first book, and we kept the same idea. So it's written for the non-believer.
Okay. Yeah,
But how do
very
you
good.
live your daily life and keep your eye on the goal in order to get to heaven? So it's from time to eternity.
Beautiful. I love it. Now the title, let's talk about the title before I dive into the structure, because the structures, they're each of them are different in the structure. Easy to read, but you've got your chapter in Dying to Live is very straightforward. There are sections in the final exam, and there are also sections in this one,
Yeah.
subheadings. But the title first, time, that does remind me of something that's happened in Sydney. I remember seeing this on a campaign. I remember even seeing on the Harbour Bridge on one New Year's Eve the word eternity. So can you tell us, has that got anything to do with the inspiration here? Where did the
That has
title?
everything to do with the inspiration for the cover as well. And what you remember seeing, that's why the cover is as it is, because in the fireworks for the year 2000, they put eternity in big lights on the
yes.
Harbour Bridge. It wasn't
Remember
quite
that.
as big as this. That's all made up. But that was there in the year 2000. And why did the Sydney City Council, organizing the fireworks, put eternity on the Harbour Bridge that year? That is why this book is entitled Time to Eternity and explained in the introduction. My working title as I was writing the book was The Journey of Life, or The Journey to Heaven, something like that. And then I was going for constitutional walks after I had heart surgery in March of this year. And I saw a metal plaque, a plate on the curb outside a Baptist church near where I live. And then I discovered there was another one on the opposite side of the same street. And it said, eternity, where will you spend it?
Yeah.
And the eternity was written in that handwriting, which is quite close to the original one. And then I remembered this, and I remembered that there was a person who, for, as it turns out, 35 years, from 1932 to 1967 when he died, was writing eternity on the footpaths of Sydney with yellow chalk. And the origin of that was, this man, his name was Arthur Stace.
Yes.
He was born in an impoverished family, poor. He became an alcoholic in his teens. He went to jail. He was practically illiterate. And he was attending a sermon in a Baptist church in Sydney in 1932. And he was struck by what the minister was saying. He was talking about eternity. Where will you spend it? And Arthur Stace was so struck by that he took a piece of chalk out of his pocket at the time and wrote eternity on the floor of the church wherever he was sitting. And then when he had finished doing that, he and the preacher as well looked at his handwriting. He could hardly write his own name legibly, but this was beautiful handwriting which he couldn't understand. And from then on, he went out every morning and wrote eternity on the footpaths of Sydney. And I say in the introduction that the whole of Sydney was reminded day after day of eternal life, not just life here on earth, but eternity.
Yes.
And so Today, when we're not reminded much at all about eternity, I thought, let's put that as the title for the book, From Time to Eternity. So that's why it has that title, and that's why it has that cover, because it's the harbor bridge, and with eternity on it, and a little bit of anecdote as regards the use of the word eternity in the handwriting.
Yes.
I sent to the graphic designer of the Catholic Weekly, who has done all 3 covers, Matthew de Souza,
Yes.
a photograph of eternity on the harbor bridge in those fireworks. And then he thought, yes, I can develop this into the cover. And he was using the actual handwriting that you can find on the net of the original handwriting.
Okay.
And then he said, but you might check whether there's copyright with respect to this handwriting. So then the publisher, Connor Court, contacted the Sydney City Council and found out, yes, they had the copyright to that handwriting. And a lawyer later explained, you can't have a copyright for somebody's handwriting because they didn't do it themselves. Anyway, so then he asked them, who do we go within the council to get permission to use it for the cover of a book? And they said, well, we don't know. So he just abandoned the whole idea, and we used a font which is very similar. And so that's the cover. So that's From Time to Eternity.
That's fascinating, that story. You have gone into detail in that introduction for people to read. But what a way to evangelize. This man probably, just reminded most of Sydney. But because of that impact, it then, in 2000, for the council to then say, let's put that word up. Especially for a secular society. This is fascinating.
Yes, and then in the Olympics that same year, now I don't know exactly how it was used, but they used eternity in the Olympics in the year 2000, the Sydney Olympics.
Look at the impact one individual can have. That man wouldn't have any idea after he died that this was going to be used.
Yeah, he has probably helped many people get to heaven with his handwriting.
Simple, amazing. Now there are 11 chapters here, very similar. You've got 11 in the first book, and but the subheadings. So what's interesting about the structure here? You've got the getting started. We get into the concept of eternity. I was going to pick a few of these chapters and just to whet the appetite of people. But can we just start with the getting started? What is that part about? How do we get started about this topic of eternity, and what do you do in the book?
Well, I'll have to remind myself because I haven't looked at that chapter.
Directly after.
Oh yes.
Directly after the introduction.
Yeah. No. No, I remember. This is, I thought, is a kind of a clever way to begin a book. And then let's just read the first couple of lines. It was the idea was going through my head at the time, and I thought, well, that could be the beginning of the book. So it reads like this. Your alarm goes off, 6:30. What day is it? Thursday. What's on today? Same as yesterday and tomorrow. Go to work. Get out of bed, shower and shave, help your wife feed the kids breakfast, help prepare their lunches, leave home at 7:30, catch the 7:47 train, arrive at work. Anything special on today? Just a meeting at 11, but you've prepared your report and the meeting goes well. And it goes on like this through a whole series of events in the life of an average person in which he is very well prepared for what is going to happen. He's going on a holiday and he's got all the arrangements done already. And then I say to the reader, because that could be any reader at all, it's common, I say, okay, you're well organized for all of your earthly events. How about the journey that's most important of all? What's that? The journey to heaven. Oh, haven't thought much about that. So this book is to get the person who is well organized about everything in his earthly life to think about getting organized for the most important journey at all, which is the journey to heaven.
Brilliant.
So that's the idea of getting started.
I love that.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, how we just sort of go with the flow and we can be in a routine, but sometimes, because we are creatures of habit, right? Whatever we do, we just sort of go on like clockwork and not think things through. Yeah. It's a great way to start. Wow. Now then you do talk about topics that maybe others have not thought of, that there's people who, again, if this is for a general audience and they're not thinking about these things, but you touch on topics of, the destination is real, the soul, near-death experiences, people who have come back from the dead. Is that, in fact, what sort of things do you talk about there? Because that's fascinating. Do we have evidence of the soul? Do we have evidence of near-death experiences? And what does that reveal to us? That'll be fascinating.
Well, that is just a recapitulation in summary form of what a good part of the first book, Dying to Live.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind the reader who may not have read the first one that, look, there is life after death, and here is why. So we have the soul, we have the experience of near-death experience, people who have had a cardiac arrest, their soul has left the body. And so we have a soul, it's left the body. So there's just a number of areas there that are a recapitulation of the first book, just to remind the reader, heaven is for real.
Yeah, very good. So as you go through these chapters, and I love, this is great, we're sort of giving our listeners and viewers a taste of what's in here, because it's excellent. It's very well laid out. But destination is attractive. You look at heaven, hell, our goal in life.
Yeah.
And then you go on, the God who awaits us. And then God is love, mercy. He's the Father. God is provident, and then we all meet Jesus too. So is this now? Are we leaning into now? You're inviting. Tell us a bit about this. How do you approach? If it's a non-believer, someone, let's say if it's an atheist that's picking this up, what sort of things are you sharing in this chapter, chapter 4, the God who awaits us?
Okay. Now, so heaven is for real, and heaven is where we meet God. Now, we've talked about God in Dying to Live, but not going into it in much detail. But there is a God who is a God of love and mercy, and all the emphasis is on mercy, not on judgment, not on a God of wrath, which some people believe, and of course that isn't any God. There's no God like that. It's a God of mercy. So we want to tell the reader, look, the one you're going to meet at the end of life is a God who loves you, who sent his son to die on a cross for love of you, to open up heaven. And he is a God that you're going to look forward to meeting. He is a Father. He is love. He is mercy. He is forgiving. So we want to tell the reader, the God that you're going to meet is a God that you will long to be with and to spend eternity with. So he doesn't look upon God as some distant spirit, creator, but he's a person, and he's a Father. That's the idea of that.
Okay. And then the dialogue with God. So the idea of prayer, talking to this God. So now we've established as a person, you go into this chapter 5, talking with God in prayer, and then you lay out different types of prayer. You got the vocal prayers, Psalms, the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary, the Rosary meditation. So some of those are obviously very Catholic as well. So what can we expect in this chapter, talking with God in prayer, and what is the difference between vocal prayer and then some of these other ones, that Psalms, and why have you laid it out this way?
Well, the chapter follows from knowing God. Well, if we're going to meet God in heaven, we can already start relating to him here on earth. So again, this is for the non-believer, but if they believe in heaven and now they believe in God, which presumably they do, by the time they got to the end of Dying to Live, we're talking about what is heaven in the Catholic view, because we justified in that book why listen to the Catholic Church?
Yes.
Why listen to Jesus Christ? Why read the Bible? So all of that is apologetic to explain why it's reasonable to look at what the Catholic Church has to say about life after death, because it's had a well-developed teaching for the last 2,000 years. So we look at that there, and that's just a bit of a recapitulation here. But since there is a God who awaits us in heaven, then we don't need to wait till heaven to get to know him. Let's start relating to him now, and that relationship is prayer. And most of those forms of prayer are not specifically Catholic. For example, mental prayer or meditation Anybody can do that. There's Eastern meditation, except in normal forms of Eastern meditation, you are emptying the mind of everything to dwell on yourself and maybe concentrate on your breathing. Well, in Christian prayer, and there's a whole document of the Holy See on this question, where we are not emptying our mind, we're filling our mind with Christ, with God. So we can talk with God. We can talk about our life. What's going on in my life? What's going wrong? What am I looking forward to? What are the good things that have happened? Let's pray. Let's start talking with God, because God is responsible for the good things and the bad things. I mean, He's allowing us to have bad things in our life too. So that's meditation is talking with God in our own words. And then vocal prayers are prayers with a fixed formula. Now, mind you, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, when they speak about the three main types of prayer, which are meditation, vocal prayer, and contemplation, they do not define them. And I could go into that for some time, explaining why they didn't define them, because the terms vocal and mental are quite ambiguous. They cross over. Anyway, so then vocal prayers. Now here, if one belongs to a religion which has its own prayers, but they're prayers directed to God, then by all means use them. In the Catholic Church, we have some vocal prayers like the Rosary, like the Angelus, like the Act of Contrition, the Hail Holy Queen, the Memorare, and so on. But we want the reader to start talking with God, and if he knows some prayers, or he wants to read some, and you can find them on the net, let's say a prayer to God who is Father, well, that's the Our Father that Christ gave us, then use those prayers, because those are ways of talking with God, getting more familiar with Him too, falling more in love with Him, and more desirous of meeting Him in heaven. That's what we want to build up, is the desire to meet this God, and prayer is one way of doing that.
Fantastic. It is fascinating. Just on the topic of prayer, a lot of, typically, and it's a common thing, isn't it? When do people pray the most? It's a time of need, time of struggle, time of difficulty. And what types of prayer are they? They're typically, God, give me this, give me that, or help me get through this, or if you're there, I really need a hand here. And a lot of it is it almost feels like it's there's nothing wrong with doing that, but if that's your only type of conversation with God, then it's very much one-way traffic, isn't it? It's just asking this God that we know can help us to help us. But if that's our only conversation, imagine, children probably do it all the time. My kids, Dad, give me this, give me that, give me that, give me that. But there's no sort of thank you, appreciation of what you've done, or thinking about asking us the question. So do we ask God questions? So then that moving from then just the vocal to the mental, and yes, there is some crossover, but that conversation is very important, isn't it? The talking and listening, but then not just listening, but even thinking about these other things in life, matters in our life. Can you just tips, to help people move from that vocal to mental? Is there something we can do there? Do you touch on it in the book, or is there something you can say now? Just give someone tips on how do we even move? Because many Catholics probably are stuck in maybe vocal only and not have an opportunity to actually meditate. I know even I struggle, the idea of mental prayer and making that part of our daily, regular prayer life. Where would we start, and what tips do you have there?
Well, when I speak to people about doing mental prayer, I say there are two starting points. One is have a book, to take the Bible. And if someone is a Catholic, goes to Mass, then take the readings from Mass today and pray with them. Beautiful. I always do that in the morning, and that's my topic in the morning, generally the prayer. And often if I'm going to school, I've got to give a homily, and on Sundays as well. So you pray about the reading. So you're using a book, and I'm a priest of Opus Dei, and I recommend and use the books of St. Josemaria. It's got 3 volumes called The Way, Furrow, and the Forge, with over 3,000 short points for consideration and mental prayer. It just stimulates talking with God. Yes. But there's also the Book of Life. And the Book of Life is what's going on in my life. And someone might say, I had a big argument with my wife last night. Let's pray about that. Why did I have that argument? Why was I so stubborn? How did that begin? Did I apologize afterwards if it became too heated? So that's the book of life. Or your daughter is going for her final exams. Well, let's pray with God, please help my daughter to do well. And then maybe she's done well, so we thank God as well in our mental prayer. Or somebody is sick, and Lord, help me to get over this, or help that person to get over it. And so the book of life is a source of conversation with God about what's going on. It's an easy starting point.
Yes.
And so that's topics that one can use for one's mental prayer. Now, I always suggest too that mental prayer is probably the hardest one, because how do we keep on talking with God for a long period of time? It doesn't have to be long either. Start with 5 minutes or 10.
Yes.
But it's not all that difficult, at least when you've done it as long as I have, to talk with God for a longer period of time. But just start with life. Don't start with difficulties, or start with books are helpful, very helpful. Now, one of the things about prayer in general that the Catechism of the Catholic Church says is prayer is a battle. Now, that's consoling, because it says the saints of all times tell us this in the scriptures, that prayer is a battle. Against whom? Well, against the devil, who's trying to get us not to pray, and distractions and tiredness, and I don't feel like it, and I'm busy today. And there's always a battle just to do the prayer and then in the prayer. But let's engage this God in this battle. And so we keep in touch with him throughout life. Because if we don't pray, then we're going to be surprised when we finally do die, and we're going to meet God, and he's going to say, why weren't you talking with me beforehand? It's a way to get to know and love God and look forward to being with him. Lord, I long to see your face.
Fantastic. That's such an important part, especially on a topic of eternity. But this idea of talking to God, there's really what is more powerful than having that conversation with the one who we're going to meet when we do die, and that is powerful. And to start, that's brilliant. We just have the book of life right there. I think people can take a lot out of that. Thank you. I think I feel like we could do a whole session on prayer alone, just because there's so much in it. But thank you for that. You also, I mean, that's only chapter 5. There's 11 in total, but going through other things like priorities. Heart in God, not in goods. Now, just some of these subheadings here: getting our priorities right, detachment of the heart, the dangers of love of wealth, another way of life, then generosity with our wealth. So you're now talking about the material side of things here. The idea of detachment. So can you explain detachment of the heart?
Yeah.
What are you saying in this part here?
Well, we can get so absorbed in the world and making money and keeping our bank account with some money in it, which is all important. We've got to do this, and wealth is a good thing. If we have more wealth, we can be more relaxed. We're not worrying about paying bills, and we can be generous with our wealth too, but not our heart there. The easiest thing, because the world is around us, we see our car, we see our house, we see our clothing and our travel and whatnot, and we can get absorbed in the world here below, but we don't want to have a heart in it. Use the world. St. Augustine has a nice comment. I have to see if I can remember what it is. I have it in Latin, but it's use the goods of this world not with the heart of a lover, but with the modesty of a user. So we're not going to love this world, which is what we tend to do. We tend to love the world and things, get more money and start another business and whatever. But with the modesty of a user, we need things, but let's keep our heart in God. Ultimately, he is the one that can truly satisfy it. Goods can.
Yes, yeah, I love that. Some people mistakenly might say, money is the root of all evil, and you hear that comment, but it's really the love of money or the love of these things where we're so attached to them. If we, And that is the issue there, isn't it?
No,
The
that's
attachment to those things.
That's in that chapter.
Yeah,
It's
fantastic.
the love of money, and I emphasize the point.
Now, it's interesting because you're building a case here as you're going through. You discover, okay, our life isn't just an accident. So we're moving across. You can see there's a journey in this book, moving the reader to think, okay, all right, now there is a God. Now what? Okay, I'm going to communicate with this God. Now what? All right, how do I deal with material things? Okay, fine. Now what? And this is the next bit, striving to please God. So, okay, well, listening to our conscience. What is that, by the way? And how do we know? Our other voices, then the jigsaw puzzle of life. So this is in chapter 7 now. How do we please God? How do we even know what we need to do to please God?
Yeah, the main thing in that chapter is doing the will of God, because God has a will. He has a plan for everybody. For everybody he creates, he has a plan. Now, in some cases, like you and me, he's given us a lot of graces. We're Catholics.
Yes.
We're practicing our faith. He can expect more from us. But other people, he has a plan for them too. But they grew up in a deprived family. Maybe dad wasn't even there, and alcoholism and whatever. And his plan for them is more limited. But God has a plan for them too. And for all of us to ask the question, what does God want from me now? What is his will for me today in this moment? Pleasing God is doing his will. And that's what sanctity is. St. Alphonsus Liguori sums it all up. He says, all of holiness consists in the love of God, and all of the love of God consists in doing his will. So not what we feel like, doing his will. So pleasing God, seeking his will, and doing his will. And then actually the jigsaw puzzle of life comes from watching some people, actually in the Kenter Study Center, where I often go to say Mass in the household administration. And they were putting together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle over a period of many months, quite a few years ago. And when they finished, I suggested to them, don't unravel the jigsaw puzzle, keep it somewhere, because life is like a jigsaw puzzle. And every day we are putting pieces in place. And the difference between the jigsaw puzzle of life that we are now putting in place throughout our life, from our childhood till the end, the difference is we don't know what the final picture looks like. And the final picture changes as we go through life. Like, I am now a priest. I never expected to be one. I was going to be a lawyer. And I know I'm a candidate lawyer, so that's at least part of that. But we don't know what God has in plan. But each day, just put in place the pieces that he wants. When you look back at your life, if you put in place the pieces he wants, it has harmony. It has beauty. If you were just doing your own thing, and some of the time you did his thing, then it's going to be a discordant lack of harmony in the final picture, which is what God is going to judge. So jigsaw puzzle of life is doing God's will day by day, putting each piece in place as far as you can. And we make mistakes too, but hopefully fewer mistakes, and overall the puzzle is beautiful. So that's pleasing God, doing his will.
Yeah, fantastic. Now you go into a topic here, these virtues in chapter 8, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. I mean, for those who have not heard these words before, very quickly, these are virtues that we talk about in the church, cardinal virtues, but what do these mean for the everyday person in life? Prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what is a virtue? It's a good habit that facilitates doing good. Now, if we want to please God, if we want to store up treasure in heaven, then we want to be doing good things rather than sins and evil things. And virtues help us to do good things, just as vices help us to do bad things. So we want to develop virtues. And then the 4 cardinal virtues do not come from the Catholic Church. They come prior to the Church. They come from, I think Aristotle speaks about them. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. They're cardinal virtues. The word cardinal comes from the word for hinge, cardo in Latin. And other virtues hang off these main ones. And prudence is knowing what is the right thing to do and choosing to do that. And it's the charioteer of the virtues. It guides the other virtues. What is the right thing to do? So let's try to do that. Prudence, justice, to give to each one his due, and to give to God his due, because God made us. We owe everything to him. To give to our neighbor his due, and we sign a contract. To give to our parents or our children their due. We owe them a lot. So give to each one his due is justice. Then prudence, justice, fortitude is strength of will, is having the courage, sometimes they call it courage, to overcome the difficulties in achieving a difficult good and not giving up because it was difficult. It's pursuing that good, and the good of holiness is one of those. The good of being a good parent, of being a good son of God or a daughter of God, a good worker, a good student. There are obstacles to be overcome, and fortitude helps us to overcome the difficulties in the pursuit of a good. And then the other one is temperance, and here we are dealing with the pursuit of a good too. But in this good, we are drawn irresistibly to, let's say, all the good things that we like. A beer and a whiskey, and watching television too much, and looking at our mobile phone too much, and eating too much, and eating the wrong things, and maybe reading good books. It's good, reading with moderation too. But so actually, when I was giving classes, I've given many classes on the Catholic faith, and when I was giving classes on the cardinal virtues, a student who is now a priest said, "Father, could we say that fortitude is like the spurs to spur the horse on when he's starting to get tired, and temperance is like the reins to hold the horse back when he's wants to run too fast?" And I thought, that's brilliant, and I've used it ever since. It's probably in the book. I can't remember whether I put it here.
Thank you. Great. Well, there's only 3 chapters there as we're wrapping up, but obstacles along the way, world, the flesh, the devil, you touch on that now. So God has had a mention, now we're talking about the devil. Where do you go with this?
Well, we can't be naive. Life of holiness and life of living a decent life is not easy. No. There are challenges out there. The world I consider to be the environment around us. And it is not healthy today. It is sick. And all we need to do is just turn on the television and say, look at our mobile phone. Look at the pornography that so many people are falling into. Yes. This is the world and the attitudes of people and the way they live and the godlessness and so on. Then the flesh, I consider that to be everything inside of us, the effects of original sin. So we have pride, and we have vanity, and we have laziness, and we have love for comfort and self-indulgence. And we've got to battle with this. Yes. It's not easy. And then the devil is there compounding it, seeking whom he may devour, and leading us into sin. So this is the reality. And life is like that today. And one thing I keep on saying too, I won't say how old I am, but I'm not as young as I used to be. And when I was growing up, the world was different. I grew up in the States, in a small village in Wisconsin, and growing up then, but in the whole of the world, the Western world in the 1940s and 50s, it was a settled world in which people went to church, marriages stayed together, television when it came on was 100% wholesome.
Yes.
It was a different world in which to bring up children, in which to live. Today, it's not that way. We need virtues, and these are the difficulties. Let's not be naive. They exist. Can we go to the final chapter, because I really love that chapter?
Yeah, the sporting spirit, and you've got so many here, having a goal, striving for the goal, sacrifice, self-control, training program, the coach, coping with failures, which is important, the doctor of physiotherapist, following the rules, timeouts, finishing the race. I love it. So that's the final chapter. Tell us what
Where did that come from? That come from that came from meditations I used to give to young people in Olympic years.
Ah,
Now, we've
okay.
just come through the Olympics
Yes, of course.
and the Paralympics. And I would tell them, look, and I quoted St. Paul. In fact, we're giving this interview on this day when the first reading in Mass is St. Paul saying, you know that the race is for many, but the prize is for run. Run that you may obtain it. All athletes live self-control in all things. Yes. They do it to win a crown that fades, whereas ours is imperishable. So that's the setting for that final chapter. And we look at athletes and what they do to achieve their goal. And if they get to the Olympics, for example, these are the elite. This is the best in the world. But other athletes are at the level of their high school, or just people that want to do better in some sport because they enjoy doing it and they want to improve. But they have a goal. And if athletes are going to go through a whole series of steps and activities to achieve their goal, which is a crown that fades, and today a gold medal is quite different from a laurel wreath, was the one that fades that St. Paul was talking about. If they're going to do that for earthly goals, why can't we do all of that for eternal life with God? And so this chapter is better developed than the meditations I used to give. But all the steps of an athlete, I think there's 10 different steps there. Yes. And each one is relevant to the spiritual life. Like they have a coach. Well, let's have a spiritual director. Let's go to someone who might be a lay person, someone that we know who's just a little bit ahead in the spiritual struggle ahead of us. Let's go to them and get some advice. Or they have a training program, athletes. And our training program is daily routine in our spiritual life. Let's get out of bed. Let's do a morning offering. Let's maybe have some mental prayer. Let's try to get to Mass if we can. Let's say the Rosary. Let's do the Angelus at noon or some other time. So a daily routine of prayers. Then there's self-control. So that's mortification. It's penance. It's self-denial. It's just living temperance, controlling our appetites. Then timeouts. Someone suggested this while I was talking about the book, and they mentioned timeouts, and I hadn't thought of that. So I put timeouts. We need timeouts too. In some sports, there's a timeout. In basketball, there's a timeout. Yes. In some sports, there's a quarter time or a halftime break. What do we do then? We just rest and we take stock of where we are, how we've gone, how we can improve in the next period. Well, the timeout for us is our prayer, maybe at night. It's a monthly day of recollection. It's a yearly retreat. We need timeouts too, and that helps us. And then following the rules. St. Paul, there's at least 4 or 5 quotes from St. Paul on athletic aspects of life. And one of them is, you must follow the rules. Well, the moral laws are rules. And then finishing the race. We've got to finish the race. We can't set out on a journey of sanctity and then give up after 20 or 30 years because it was too hard. We've got to finish the race to the end. And then one of the final lines in the book is St. Paul, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have redeemed my pledge. And now all that's waiting is the crown that is awaiting me, to me and to all who have redeemed, who have sought his appearing. So much of St. Paul in the book, but we've got to finish the race like St. Paul did, then the crown awaits us of eternity.
Yes. Wow.
That's
well done. Amazing. We just did a quick journey through that whole book there, From Time to Eternity. Very excited that this is out. Very easy to follow. So congratulations, Father, again. This completes the trilogy, Dying to Live, the final exam, and now From Time to Eternity. Powerful. Available now. We've got all 3 on our website, parousiamedia.com. It is on other popular platforms too, Amazon, and thanks to Connor Court, who've published this. You are going around Sydney and even Australia sharing about this, so we're wishing you well for that and praying for that. I do have to do an honourable mention of question time, because it is here as we wrap up, but very quickly, this is now number 6. So question time 6, just like the others, 150 questions. Can you just, anything, I'm curious to know this about question time 6, which is now available, 6 books now, 150 years, that's 900 questions we've got. 900 questions. When was the first one published? Do you recall what year
yes.
did that come out?
Oh, yes. Well, the whole origin of my writing a column in the Catholic Weekly, which I started in 2005, was before I started writing that column of questions and answers. The Catholic Weekly in Sydney had a syndicated column from a priest in the U.S. And every now and then people would ask me, Father, is this good Catholic teaching? And occasionally I would say, look, that's not the best. So one day I was sitting with the editor of the Catholic Weekly at a lunch, and I said, do you know that column you've got on questions and answers? If you want, I could write that column for you, because I was then just recently named Director of Catholic Adult Education for Sydney. And I was writing and teaching the faith, and people would ask me questions, because as Director of Adult Education, you probably know some answers.
Yes.
They would send me questions, I would answer them, and I would keep the answers in a folder on my laptop. And I thought, well, I could write that column because I've already started answering some questions. And the editor was just thrilled, because he said, Cardinal Pell asked me to find someone local to write that column. And he gave me the name of a priest, and I asked him, and he said he couldn't do it. And then along comes this priest offering to do it, and he was just thrilled that somebody was going to solve his problem. So I started in 2005. The first volume came out in 2008, 3 years later. So there's about 150 questions. Well, there are 150 questions, and that's about 3 years worth. People were asking me, are you going to publish these as a book? Because I cut them out, I paste them on paper, I photocopy them, I give them to my friends, how helpful it would be if there were a book. So that's where the Question Time 1 came. And then there's been, every 3 years, there's been another one.
Wow, fantastic.
And I'm now halfway through Question Time 7.
Wow, look at that. Just in summary, I mean, you've grouped them up here, but I am fascinated. Have you noticed over the last, we're talking 20 years now, 19 years, has the nature of the questions changed from 2005? What types of questions generally what you were coming across then? Are they very different now? I'm very curious if, particularly around the cultural side of things, have you noticed a transition? Have we moved much over 19 years of questions? Have you noticed the nature of the questions very different?
You're asking me a question I hadn't thought of, but as you're asking it, I'm thinking of an answer. And there's some changes. First of all, one of the most common questions when I started was, Father, in my parish, the priest is doing this in the Mass. Is that correct?
Yes.
There were so many liturgical questions that I told myself, I'm not going to write more than, I think I set myself maybe one a month, which is quite a lot. But anyway, those have died down. Things are more settled in the church. There's still, in Question Time 6, there's a lot of questions on the Mass and communion, but they're not so much irregularities as doctrine and whatnot.
Okay.
So there was that. But then over the 20 years that I've been writing this is the 20th year, societal issues have emerged and proposed legislation. So as those have come, people have asked me questions and I've answered them. Like when COVID came, the whole business of vaccines came. And so there's a number on that. Okay. Then when proposed legislation on abortion, more recently euthanasia, and then legislation on conversion therapy. In this book, in Question Time 6, there's a long section on euthanasia. Yes. In fact, I put some of those questions together and sent it off to some of the politicians in the state parliament of New South Wales. And I sent it to a chief of staff that I knew writing the speeches for a member of the upper house. And he took what I wrote. That was the speech for his member was exactly what I wrote, but he added some very interesting things. So euthanasia has a lot. Conversion therapy has become a recent issue. People are asking about that. Things, there's about 5 or 6 on gender theory. And,
that's an example of definitely a more recent
so as issues arise, they'll keep on arising, then then I can write about them, because people
Beautiful. At
ask.
the end, you got a lady and the saints, and you got a long list of questions about each saint that you I imagine. Are you just explaining a bit, I guess, a bit about the saint? Is that what it is, or what? I'm curious. What types of questions? How is that dealt with? You got a lot. This is probably one of the longer sections in here. How do you deal with the saints?
Well, people often ask about a saint because they've heard about one or they've seen. There's various origins of the questions. Often they're common just in conversations with people. They come in classes I'm giving in school, or people come up to me, or people write, of course, questions by email. There's some very good ones coming that way. Okay. But anyway, so with saints, they'll say, look, I've heard about this saint, or my friend was talking about, she's got devotion to this saint, and who was she? And so saints that I'd never heard of, some of them. So I just look online, and there's plenty online these days. And then, so I write something, a bit of the life of the saint, what was their contribution to the church, what was their particular strength in their focus of their life and whatnot. So we've got modern ones like Carlo Acutis, and then ancient ones going right back, ones that I hadn't heard of, but interesting. And it just, if you feel you come to know the tradition of the church and the lived out reality in the lives of saints.
I love the structure. It is, you've got the chapters and you've grouped your questions in different topics. And then you've continued the numbering system throughout the whole thing. So question number 1 in question time 1 continues right through to question time. So I'm looking at 797. And so you've actually got, so there really is a bit of a series here that as if you get them, you'll get the progression of all these questions. So it's beautifully done with lots of scripture quotes, catechism quotes, history, very thoroughly done. So what a masterpiece. This is fantastic for anyone who wants to just know general topics. You can look through the contents, pick a topic and look at the answer. You don't have to read it cover to cover, but you could use it as a reference, which is brilliant. So congratulations again on this too, Father.
Pleasure.
This is also available on our website, parousiamedia.com. So just in closing, I mean, you're building a library here of, we've got so much there, but lifelong learning, you're constantly writing. But any final comments here as we wrap up, Father, just in general?
Well, I suppose in writing all these books, I learn a lot. One of the things about teaching or writing is you do research, and then the more you write and the more you teach, the more you learn. So I know a lot more now than I ever did when I started all of this. And hopefully I've helped a few other people to know their faith a bit more fully too. And that's the goal. And I'll keep it up as long as God gives me clarity of mind and time. Yes. And I feel I can just make some little contribution to understanding and loving God and getting people to heaven. So I'll keep on doing that as long as God gives me the strength. So so far so good.
Well, please do. We're praying for you. Thank you very much. You'll crack the 1,000 questions soon. So on question time 7, can't wait to see that one come out as well. So thanks, Father, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Charbel. Good to be with you again.
That's Fr John Flader, and we are now excited to launch not 1 but 2 books here today. We've got Time to Eternity, and we've got Question Time 6, now available at Parousia Media, and now this completes the trilogy, of course, with Dying to Live and Final Exam. So please do yourself a favour, get to the website and get your copy today. Thanks again, everyone. Please pray for Father Flader. Please pray for his work. Pray for this podcast and this series and everything we're doing at Parousia. We want to get this out to as many people as possible, so please subscribe and please share this with your family and friends. Thanks again. I'm Charbel, your host. Until next time, God bless.